Well, welcome to this session. And first and foremost, welcome again. I love the fact that there is a full-blown code of conduct for DDD events because, yes, we all say every now and then, yeah, please be a decent human being and please behave correctly. But it's nice to see that clearly and clearly defined. And again, it's just a few points about, be aware of others and other people's behavior, other people's sensitivity, be a patient person, listen and be friendly, and also be open to all questions and viewpoints because, everybody has got an opinion and everybody has got the right to an opinion. In general, be kind and considerate to others. That's, I would say, the most important thing about these events. And in fairness, I never had any problem whatsoever because all participants to DDD events are usually adhering to this code of conduct. So it's brilliant to see that, and it is brilliant to just know that it's a safe space for everyone. Another thing is donations to the National Museum of Computing. That's an institution that's worth donating to because of all the good work that they put on and the hard work that they do all year round. So again, even it's just a coffee, but it's worth donating to the fundraising for them. And also sponsors, because events like this do not happen without sponsors. So everyone managed to chip in and make sure that the event can happen, and that also a donation to a fundraiser for the National Museum of Computing happen. So again, thank you again to the sponsors because all events require some support and they've been behind us all the way through. If you want to tweet about me and about how boring this session is, you can reach out at DDD 2020 or at Developer Day. But again, enjoy your day. I hope you'll find it interesting. And this session will be about GitHub and Azure DevOps. So is there confusion or maybe not? I'm Matteo, I work at Avalon UK in Ireland, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP for Azure DevOps. And today, I'll try to clear out some of the confusion that arose from having both platforms in the same place. I remember the day when Microsoft announced the acquisition of GitHub. It was June 2018. I was in Palma de Mallorca, poolside. I was on holiday. I was checking my email, and I saw this communication coming through. Oh, Microsoft acquired GitHub. That was something else because nobody could see that coming, and obviously it was as unexpected as it comes. The acquisition completed in October 2018, and everything has been absolutely fine on that. But nowadays, we are in a situation where we have confusion. Why? Well, there are so many reasons, but it's worth remembering that everything has got a place and a purpose. So if you think about it, GitHub and Azure DevOps, they both host Git repositories. GitHub and Azure DevOps both have an orchestrator. GitHub and Azure DevOps both have a way of tracking work, and they both have something that can host packages. But there are differences, and each and every one of them will have its own purpose. Think about it. GitHub's strengths are all about collaborative development and the fact that it comes out of the box because GitHub is the home of open source. So any developer jumping on GitHub or GitHub Enterprise, for this matter, is going to be able to apply the same open source patterns and the same open source way of working that they're used to for their public projects inside an organization. I'm doing it as we speak inside one of my clients where we're working with an inner source model, and we are doing it in a way that comes in very natural. It is agnostic, so GitHub doesn't have any strong connection to anything outside of GitHub itself. And that's one of the characteristics of GitHub because it enables developers to build up stuff, automations, code, whatever, that can then be reused as part of automations. We'll see that later on, but when you talk about automations running in GitHub Actions, which is GitHub's orchestrator, then you will see that there is no strong connection between anything and GitHub. There is no service connection. There is no integration between, let's say, Azure or AWS or whatnot into GitHub. Everything needs to be done from scratch. And that's one of the strengths of GitHub because it enables developers to replicate their workflow and their automations from their development machines directly onto a platform. Also, an important point is that in GitHub, repositories are the center of the role. So if you think about it, GitHub as a platform is a hoster of Git repositories. There is no boundary, there's no segregation, there is nothing that prevents someone, unless obviously there are ACLs in place, nobody prevents someone from pushing to a repository, working on another repository, and having line of sight of the whole content. That is one of the major GitHub strengths, because it enables teams, individuals, and generally speaking, people within organizations to work on main products, let's say. So, stuff that's part of the company, one of the products being developed, or for clients or whatnot, but also on spikes, side projects, or other efforts within the same organization, but which do not fall as part of a project per se. So that's one of the big GitHub strengths, because you can spin up a repository on the fly, you can do it very quickly, and you can collaborate with other people with that repository without having to create another project, assigning security, permissions, and so on. On the Azure DevOps side, the strengths are different and they are unique. So one of them is the end-to-end integration between the various verticals. So if you think about it, Azure boards, Azure pipelines, repos, artifacts, test plan, they're all very tightly integrated. You can refer to artifacts from one side to the other very easily. And that's always been one of the big strengths of Azure DevOps, having an integrated end-to-end platform, which comes in handy for so many organizations. Azure DevOps has also got service-aware connections, which is something that we leverage heavily, I would say, in general. So, when you connect, let's say, an Azure subscription to Azure DevOps by a service principal, you don't see that happening because you authenticate the subscription and you add it to Azure DevOps. Brilliant, done. In reality, behind the scenes, there is a connection with the service principal that's created in the Azure tenant. You don't see that, but they are tightly connected together. So once you have that set up, then you will be able to use that service connection wherever you need it with just a couple of clicks. And that's something that nobody else has got, because Azure DevOps is so service focused that it's going to enable you to do those sort of things extremely easily. And again, it doesn't stop with Azure. It can be AWS, it can be SonarQube, it can be Fortify, it can be Jenkins, it can be anything. Okay, it's very service connection oriented, and it makes consuming those services extremely easy. Also, Azure DevOps is designed around the team and the team project. That's both one of the biggest strengths and one of the biggest flaws, if you like, because with the team project as a container for a team, you get an easy way of segregating assets and artifacts and eventually people. But obviously, that requires setting up security. That requires adding people to the relevant groups and so on. So having teams and team projects which are completely segregated one from the other can be a strength for many organizations. Imagine where you are in a situation where you need to keep assets or intellectual property physically separated from one team to another for regulatory purposes. You can only do it with Azure DevOps, because otherwise you need to set up a whole set of ACLs and security rules on any other platform. Azure DevOps gives you the team project. You can just add the right people to the right team project and you're done. Obviously, with both platforms now living together, integration is the way. So neither is the stronger nor the favorite one. It all depends in what you need to do. It all depends about your requirement. It's all about what do you actually need to achieve, because now you can build the best platform for your requirements. Both platforms are very API focused, so you can interact with each other very easily via CLI, API, whatnot. So that's very straightforward to integrate for any developer. You don't need to set up any strong middleware or anything that's time consuming. Everything can be done really, really easily. But it's all about what you need to achieve. And there are so many scenarios that you can cover now with both platforms side by side, because it will enable even more comprehensive scenarios that we could not do before. An easy example of that is having GitHub issues and Azure boards side by side. Azure boards is brilliant for the level of depth where you can detail something inside a work item. GitHub issues, on the other hand, is very nimble, very simple, and it's done on purpose because it needs to be lightweight and easy to interact with. So how about integrating the two together, where you can provide an easy and simplified view for development teams, potentially, where they just need to have access to, let's say, PBIs. And then on Azure boards, you can build up all your portfolio, all your strategy, which you might need as part of a multi-team effort, and you can keep the two connected so that the development teams will be very happy with GitHub issues because that's what they know from the open source world. And on the other side, all the BA, PMOs, and so on, they can be happy with Azure boards because they have a simple yet very powerful way of detailing all the work that's going on. Having the possibility of providing those two views to different sets of people is something that we didn't have before, and now it is possible to do thanks to the two platforms living together. Also, GitHub Actions and Azure Pipelines. Think about it. So if you want to have your code in GitHub and you want to leverage the development, the open source development model inside the corporate boundaries, brilliant. Okay, do it. Then obviously the next step would be connecting at least CI. You can connect Azure Pipelines to GitHub, no problem with that. But you might want to take advantage of, let's say, GitHub Actions because it is already there, it's closer to the code, and it does pretty much everything that you need to do for CI. Perfect. Now, GitHub Universe, there are now some new features for CD, but obviously there might be features that you don't find in GitHub Actions for CD for whatever reason. So you can integrate Azure Pipelines just for the continuous deployment and continuous delivery side. And you can do it very easily because, again, API first, API focused, they can be integrated with a couple of CLI commands. So everything on this, every integration goes around GitHub Actions. Okay, GitHub Actions is an orchestrator that spans around the whole GitHub platform. It's not just a CI/CD engine, but it does so much more. So let's take a look at a few examples. Let's call it a day with demos. This is a simple web application. It's a hello world with ASP.NET MVC core. I'm not particularly interested in the code itself because there's no value in that. The value is in the workflows that we have for the application. So let's take a look at a traditional CI process, which then interacts with something else outside. So one of the things that you will see, for example, is this initial set of statements. This is because GitHub Actions by default doesn't support manual builds. So if you want to add a manual build, you need to add a workflow dispatch command so that allows you to run it manually. Then it runs on an agent, Ubuntu latest, exactly like Azure Pipelines. I can tell you even more. GitHub Actions and Azure Pipelines are two forks of the same project. So obviously you see so many similarities in this. And then every action is referred as a step, exactly like in Azure Pipelines. So you check out the repo, you set up .NET Core with the version that you want, you build, and then you publish the artifact. Up to here, everything is straightforward and everything is the same as Azure DevOps. Now you realize that there are some differences. Whenever you need to interact with Azure, you need to log in with the subscription, and you need to do it exactly like you would in any other application or any other development workflow, using a set of secrets. Those secrets will be stored in the secret store in GitHub, and they will be encrypted over there. But again, there's no easy facility for logging in onto an Azure subscription. Then what I do is publishing a package via the Azure CLI using a PAT that I created for Azure DevOps for ease of use. And then what I do is running AZ, so the AZ CLI extensions, and I will add the Azure DevOps extension here so that I get access to the commands that I need. And then I will log into Azure DevOps, and I want to push a universal package to my artifact repository. Because what I want to do is doing CI on GitHub Actions, push the artifact to Azure DevOps, and then eventually run another pipeline called deployment for my deployment. So what happens over here is that I can run this manually. It will log it as a warning because it's a manual event. So once it runs, you will find all the familiar steps and actions that you will find in any other CI project that you'll find. So in Azure DevOps, same story. You run it manually, and you'll find the same output. Now, what's going to happen is that this will interact directly with my feed, and here my feed will be updated in a few seconds. In the meantime that we wait, and it is pretty quick, let me tell you. In the meantime that we wait, let's take a quick look at the secret store. The secret store is a place where you can store your secrets, and they can also be stored as organizational secrets. So in this case, I've got some project-specific secrets over here, which I'm using just for this project, but I also have organizational secrets that are shared across the whole GitHub account. And that's why I say GitHub Actions is a platform-wide orchestrator that goes all across, because things like this are made easy by the fact that you can have shared organizational secrets, so you can have actions that run across the platform. This is something that with pipelines will not be as straightforward to do, again, because you have the team project constraint. So let's take a look at the job over here. Still running. What is it doing? It's publishing the package. So now it's logged in, it's publishing the package, and then it's gonna run my build. My build, in reality, the pipeline that it runs, sorry, the deployment pipeline. The pipeline that it runs doesn't do anything fancy. Let me be clear about that. All it does is downloading the latest version of the package that's referred to over there, that's pushed to over there. So whenever this is updated, and it should be any second now. Oh, it has failed. Brilliant. Okay. Has failed due to secrets expired, possibly. Possibly, yeah. But anyway, what's going to happen here is that, you see, there's no strict integration, so it's going to just say use AZ login. And for whatever reason, my pipeline has failed now and didn't run. So I just get a simple error, which will be exactly the same error that I would get if I were to run this locally. What should have happened is that this package would have been updated, and then it would start this pipeline here. You can't see that here because it's all GUID, but if I look at the settings and I resolve my settings, you see that my settings are actually referring to the feed I set up with a universal package type on a local view for the package web app, and version is the latest version because of a star sign over here. So this is my feed. This should have been triggered. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Now, so much more you can do with that, because yes, CI, CD, fine, but how about integrating the two platforms? So for example, if I create an issue here, let's say that this is my front-facing, my front door for open source contributions, and I would like to get contributions in from my external community. So this is a feature request, for example. Or this might be internally a demand management system where you can ask requests, you can request stuff, and this is going to end up into the product team's backlog. And there are all sorts of scenarios that you can support with this. But in a nutshell, what is going to happen is that I open this issue here, and then an action is going to run. This action is going to synchronize my issue on the GitHub side with Azure DevOps. So those actions are available in the GitHub Marketplace, and they've been created by Dan Hellem, who's a product manager for GitHub Actions. I find it really interesting because, aside from the fact that you can obviously look at the code, brilliant, but it also shows how to interact between the two in a very automated fashion. So if you want to build an automation like this, you have an excellent example in Dan's contributions. So if we look at the work items that have been created here, it should be recently created. This is a feature request, and it comes in as a bug because that's the way I configured that. The integration is pretty good because I can get links to the issue directly into my repository here. There is a link to the GitHub issue as a piece of related work, and I could have all sorts of things in the conversation. How does this work? Again, it is all about the GitHub workflow that you created. So this is issues to work item, and on these events, so any of these events, open, edited, and so on, it's going to run, and it is going to run simply. It's going to target my organization on a certain project. I'm going to say that an issue is going to be related to a bug because, again, I'm simulating a type of open source contribution front door. So it's going to be a bug. and the new state in Azure DevOps is going to be mapped to a new state in Azure in GitHub Actions, and the closed state is going to be a closed state in GitHub Actions as well. So simple, straightforward, and there is no, there's no smoke and mirrors here. There's no magic going on. It's extremely in the clear. This is really interesting though, because it opens up those scenarios that we talked about earlier about different types of people using different tools but converging on the same set of data. And this is something that we could not do before, and now we're able to do it. But even more, let's say that we have other things like we want to push all the pull requests that happen in GitHub. We want to push them back to Azure DevOps because we might find that handy to keep track of a pull request on both sides, or you might have, again, even open source contribution model, you have people pushing in pull requests for you, and then you can go on and you can accept them or reject them. So that's something that we can do in the same way, but with a slightly different approach. So the approach is slightly different because we create a custom work item for this, and we just wanted to keep track of the pull request in a separate way. But then again, this acts on pull request rather than other events for issues, and it's going to do the same. So in the meantime that I created, let's take a look at a few questions, if any. No questions? No questions. Feel free to ask any question anytime if you had them. All right. So let's pretend I'm going to push a change and I'm going to create a pull request and synchronize it back with Azure DevOps. So I already created a develop branch, and here I can pick up a file, any file really. So let's say the README. And I edit this. This is going to be the change that my developer will do. They will come into the develop branch, fairly straightforward, and then they can create a pull request. So it doesn't take too long. It is simple. This is a simple change. You can assign other things. You can assign all sorts of information over here, like labels and projects and so on. But in a nutshell, what you want to do is to be able to connect the two systems. So all the information will be ported over. Create a pull request, and you will see that as soon as the pull request is created, then there will be a check that runs. And this is my Azure, my GitHub action that runs, and it's going to synchronize the two things. So you can't do anything to it effectively because you want to keep track of what's going to happen, and it's going to act as a final check on this. So it's going to start hopefully in a moment. It should be fairly quick because the action is a simple synchronization. It should just take a few seconds. Okay, it found an existing work item that was already created. Good. So if we look at this work item on this other side, got the ID for that. This is what the work item looks like when you synchronize the two. So I created a custom work item for pull request. This is just, again, to keep track of them. This will actually, if you want to see how this is designed, the pull request will appear at the same level as tasks. So you can consider a pull request on the same level as tasks and not as user stories, for example, just because if you have a breakdown of PBIs, then you might want to see all the tasks that the PBI is broken down with, and the pull request will fall into that category. The level of integration is pretty deep because if you look at it, it brings in all the description that was on the other side. It talks about what's the work item that's linked over there, of course, but there's also a link to the pull request itself, into the repository, and also to the pull request on GitHub directly over here. So the developers will have the same, the same experience to actually have it done on both sides, and you will enable easy traceability. Even more, if you merge it, and this is going to run again, because obviously you need to keep track of the closure of that. So this is going to run in the same way as before, but it's going to detect the new change, it's going to detect the new state, and it's going to update it on the actual work item. So still same work item, 1560. You can update it, and this will be closed. So you have the full history over here. It is completely transparent, and you don't have to do anything special. Now, platform integration level, aside from GitHub Actions, so integrating the two, if you want to instead use GitHub from Azure DevOps, so if you want to have connections from Azure DevOps to GitHub, that's extremely simple as well. So if you take up a project, this project over here, you have two main places where you need to create a connection between the two platforms. Sorry. The first one is for boards. And this is about creating a GitHub connection that's going to connect both systems for boards, so that you will enable these particular connections over here. You will find them when you add a link of any sort, so you can have links to a GitHub commit rather than a GitHub pull request. And then in the related work, you will have a link to GitHub issues and so on. So, oops. Yeah, that's existing link. Sorry. It's an existing link. So an existing item, and you will be able to find it in the list over here, GitHub issue. So you need to do it with a simple OAuth application. This application will connect to your GitHub account, or you can use PATs in case you have a restricted access to an organization or a GitHub Enterprise server. And these will connect to your repositories, and then you can select whatever you need all across your organization. So in this case, over here, I connected my personal account, so I can see all of my repositories, but I can also see all of the repositories of all the organizations that I'm part of. So this is, again, fairly flexible based on needs of the organization. And then for the actual pipelines, when you need to run anything from a pipeline, you need to create, of course, a service connection, because Azure DevOps is service connection oriented. So you can create it here. You can connect to either a GitHub or GitHub Enterprise Cloud account, or a GitHub Enterprise server instance. Whenever you go onto that, you can select how you want to integrate it. So either granting authorization directly with OAuth, or a PAT that you will be able to add. And then this will enable you to run scenarios like this, where you want to create a new pipeline, and it's going to ask you, where is the code? GitHub Enterprise Server. You select that. You select the repository that you're interested in. So let's say my blog. And then it's going to scan for the suggested template as usual, and then you will be able to add your pipeline directly to a repository. It's exactly the same story as any other project hosted in Azure repos. So you will have transparent integration between the two, and you will not have, you don't have anything that's gonna be difficult to configure that requires admin. That's the main thing. So as long as you have line of sight visibility between the two services, then you will be good to go on this matter. Any question on this?
No, we've got a very quiet audience. We've got no questions in the chat.
Okay. So talking about GitHub Actions, another thing that you can do, given that it's an orchestrator that goes all around the platform, then you can do things and integrate with services that you could not otherwise do. And an example that I actually have is whenever I blog something, when I post something on my blog, then what's going to happen is that there's going to be a tweet that's going to be sent directly. So I don't tweet manually anymore, but I'm using this as an example of, integration. Whenever I run anything on my master branch, because it is a GitHub Pages repository, still has the master name, then if the commit in GitHub doesn't contain no CI, then it's going to run this action from add function, and this is going to connect to Twitter, and it is going to send out directly the commit, the actual commit that's in there, which is usually the title of the blog post, with the link to the blog and a few hashtags. Now, this example shows how your applications and your pipelines are no longer strictly related to CI and CD, but you can also do all sorts of things based on the GitHub context. The GitHub context contains all sorts of information about your repositories, your commits, and your events that happen inside the account. So I do this, for example, as if there is a no CI, event, then do not do anything. But you can do all sorts of other things. I was thinking of something like reading through the text of a commit, and if the text of a commit contains certain keywords, then write the tweet in a slightly different way. So those things can be done, and those things can be integrated fairly easily. So with other platforms as well. Imagine that you need to have notifications to be sent out, for example. You need to send a notification every time something happens. This can be done with a simple action like this. The GitHub Actions marketplace is pretty big, and it contains all sorts of things. So being completely agnostic, there are actions for anything. If you search for it, let's say Azure, you have a number of actions that are published directly by the Azure team. As you can see, they are created, verified by GitHub, and they do one specific thing very well. So something like installing kubectl, or installing Helm, or deploying a SQL, an Azure SQL database. Every action does one thing. And the best thing about it, like the Azure pipelines task in fairness, but this is directly in the marketplace over here, that if you pick up, let's say this, you get the immediate example of how to use it, because there is no other GUI that you can use. There's no other user interface that you're using for it. You have the historical view of all the versions. So if you want a certain version, you can just get a different example to pick up. You pick up the example, you copy that, you paste into your workflow, and then you are on your way. If you want to look at the actual listing, as it's called, this is the listing directly on the marketplace, but then you can go on to the repository, and usually you will find it very interesting, because you can see how they are done, basically how they interact with the service, how they compose their actions, and it's usually very interesting. If I look at Dan's actions, for example, that I mentioned before, those are extremely interesting, because you look at it and you say, oh, I'm interacting with Azure DevOps. Yeah, that is true, but it also shows how you are interacting with a service that's completely considered third party here. So they're done in TypeScript, fairly light, fairly simple. There's not a huge learning curve on that. You import a few basic modules from GitHub Actions, and then you're on your way. So you can do anything you like, and you can see how it interacts. So you can get the payload info, and then you can count the response from the service, and then basically if a work item is not found, then it's going to be created. Okay, brilliant. So if the result of fetching the work item is 404, then create the work item, and it shows how it's a transparent interaction between the two, rather than using some SDK that you have no control over. That's what I believe is extremely powerful in terms of integration, because it's not just about consuming actions and building them up, but if you look at the work item TS file here, that's pretty interesting, because you saw the raw WQL file, the raw WQL query, and this is exactly what goes behind the scenes when you query your work items. And you can also see how the work item is constructed. So you look at it, you see that it's adding fields and values for these fields. And it's an example that you can reuse at scale wherever you need it. So it doesn't stop there. The fact that it's transparent end-to-end means that you can pick up whatever you need, and you can reuse the same approach, or if you find something, you can directly open a PR and fix it yourself. So that's why I believe it's extremely powerful to have this fully transparent story for all the actions. Okay. Another question? I'm done slightly early then. Okay. So if there are any time, then feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to answer any question. Otherwise, happy DDD. Merry Christmas if you're celebrating that, and talk to you soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Matteo.
No worries.
There's no questions from the floor. I can't see anything in our questions thing. I'll hang around for another couple of minutes just to let these questions if they want, and then we'll close it out and save some people.
In a nutshell, it's all about the simplicity, right? So it is a fairly simple exercise, but the whole premise of the session was about clearing out the confusion. So I hope that that goal was accomplished.
We have a question.
Oh, brilliant.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anonymous. So Anonymous asks, do you think having Azure DevOps, WI, and GitHub issues synced is confusing?
Well, it depends on how you design the synchronization. You don't have to synchronize everything. You can synchronize only what you need to synchronize. So if you want to synchronize only, let's say, requests coming from the outside in, you can do it. You can categorize them as, user requests rather than anything else. If you want to categorize only certain issues coming in that they have, let's say, a specific tag or a specific value in one of the fields, you can do that. And again, you don't have to get everything as a whole. It's not 100% or zero. It's not black or white. You have all the shades of gray in the middle. So you can synchronize everything you need and not everything you have. So in a nutshell, no, it's not confusing because you can choose.
Any more for any more? I've kind of got a question which is all the time bothers me. Is what is the crossover point between GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps? Since obviously they've evolved in parallel.
So they do similar things, but they do it differently. So like I shown in demos, Azure Pipelines is very focused on automations, but they happen on a team project boundary. So if you want to extend from that boundary, there is a degree of work that needs to happen. With GitHub Actions, it is simpler. It just happens naturally. So that's where you need to define what type of automation you need to run. In general, if you have your code in GitHub, you should use GitHub Actions because obviously it's already there, straightforward. Then Azure DevOps can be integrated anytime. Azure Pipelines can be integrated anytime, but it's always about the requirement you have. So they both can do 99% of the same things. The differentiator is the type of automation you need to run. So if it's something platform level, like repository agnostic or team agnostic or anything, GitHub Actions might be the best one. If you need to do something that's project specific, you can look above. Azure Pipelines might have a simpler way of doing it, use the service connections, or again, it's down to the type of automation.
Ooh, we have another question.
Let's see.
So yes, another anonymous one. If Microsoft effectively owns both tools, why don't they work together on all fronts? On all fronts.
So that's an excellent question, and I'm not Microsoft, but both platforms have got different value propositions. So obviously, if you're running GitHub Enterprise Cloud or GitHub.com, as an open source effort, maybe they're using Azure DevOps has got value propositions that are more attractive for certain type of people, like enterprises in general. While on the other side, you can do the same things, even for an enterprise in GitHub, but the fact of not having a clear boundary, for example, between repositories, that can be not a blocker, because you can overcome that, but it can be more difficult. So it's all about the type of work that needs to happen. If an organization is prone to inner source and collaborative development and so on, GitHub is brilliant. But many organizations are not, and they rather prefer to have a traditional, almost siloed project by project segregation. And that is where they will find their home in Azure DevOps. They might have other requirements, like, for example, GitHub at the moment doesn't have anything outside of the United States. There will be an offering. They announced it last year, I think, or earlier this year, but it's not been, it's not yet available. There's nothing out there at the moment, and those will obviously cover these sovereignty issues. But at the moment, GitHub.com and GitHub Enterprise Cloud is only in the United States, while Azure DevOps has got 7 or 8 regions that you can choose from. So that's another example of why they are different. They don't try to do the same thing. They have different value propositions, and that's what I think contributed to the confusion. They have similar capabilities, but GitHub has got the automatic security scanning out of the box on all the repositories and Dependabot. Azure DevOps has got other types of integrations and the strong integration between services. So they have, they do different things in a similar way, but they are effectively different platforms. It's all down to the requirements.
Brilliant. If there's no more for any more, I just want to say thank you, Matteo, for presenting this session. It's always good to have you at a DDD.
Fine. Always happy to do so.
And your contact details are here for anyone wants to reach out.
Yep.
Thank you all for attending. I believe that session feedback is on Sessionize. Certainly that was what was being discussed among organizers last night. So having your feedback is really useful.
Yeah.
And again, thanks to all the sponsors for giving us such a platform on which to see, and enjoy the rest of your DDD.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.